Hi everyone, and welcome to the fashion show by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. My name is Elodie, and I will be co-hosting this session today alongside my colleague Joe, who is joining us online. In the past 4 episodes of this fashion show, we have been exploring how fashion can thrive by designing a circular economy for clothes. In this episode, we are going to explore what circular design is and means for the fashion industry. Before we start, I just want to remind you that you can leave us your comments and questions on the channel you are watching us on, should it be YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Joe, hello Joe, how are you?
Hey, hello.
Can you just remind us a little bit, in a broad sense, what circular design actually is?
Sure. So design is really integral to the shift to a circular economy. I'd go as far as to say there's no transition to a circular economy that doesn't really harness the power of design. And it's where we look upstream to find solutions for an economy that's regenerative. So circular design really is a practice of design where designers and creatives keep those 3 principles of a circular economy at the forefront of their mind throughout the design process. And as a reminder, those 3 principles are to eliminate waste and pollution, to keep products and materials in use for longer, and to regenerate natural systems. So it's using those principles as a guide and a goal throughout the design process. And we see that this can really unlock new creative and positive innovation opportunities.
Thank you, Joe. That's the beautiful thing about circular design, isn't it? Is that it actually power your creativity and put it to another place. In order to understand today what is circular design and what it means for the fashion industry especially, we are very happy to welcome 2 guests, Alex de Betac and Helen Palmer. Hi, Alex, and hi, Helen. Nice to see you here.
Hello, Elodie. Hello, Joe. Hello, Ellen.
So,
hi, everyone.
I would like to start with Alex. So to give a bit more context around who is Alex. Alex is the creative force behind Bureau Betac, and Bureau Betac has been producing shows, events, and exhibitions for the fashion industry for the past 25 years, working with brands like Dior, Saint Laurent, Hermès, Celine, and many, many others. So Alex, could you tell us a bit more around what has been your experience applying circular design in your work? And tell us the stories about that.
The stories about circular design. Well, for a bit of context to start, obviously designing and producing fashion shows might sound like the least circular activity ever. Those shows last now hardly 10 minutes, spend a lot of money and in very little time, and of course, a lot of carbon. So given I dedicated my life to that many years ago, many years ago, I started thinking on how we can make it more sustainable. And part of the ways to make those ephemeral events more sustainable is to make them the more circular possible. Together with my team, we learned a lot. We decided a few years ago to apply to certify ourselves ISO 20121, which is the international certification for eco-responsible events, which we got in February and which we announced therefore the last February, together with a list of measures that we've learned to do and apply and that we shared with the world as our 10 commandments to more eco-responsibility and better sustainability in making events. One of the first of the 10 commandments is what we call eco-conceive and eco-conception in design, which is precisely the circularity in design of what we do. Historically, fashion shows and ephemeral events were done by luxury brands who have pretty good budgets and done very high level of qualities. And historically, they were done with new materials that were trashed. Since I started my life in doing this, I was always shocked and against it and always wondered how to do that. So one of the first things we did to make it more circular at Bureau Betac is to first of all, try to always and only work with stuff that is reusable. And when we design something that is not, because it's round or because it's entirely custom, we would design pieces pieces that are parts of pieces so that they can become reusable. We would partner with resources and vendors only that would agree with us to follow us and to make things rentable and reusable and no longer ever trashable. We also apply culturally, but also technically to every country we work in. When you go to Japan or to China or to America or to many different countries in Europe, you have different standards. 4x8 in America becomes 1 can by 2 can in Japan, and they're not the same size. And in France, they translate obviously into centimeters, and they become a different size. And that sounds very basic, but it changes everything. When you start to design with culturally locally, you design in ways that either already exist or may exist again. And of course, so that is the basis of everything we do now. Our very first commandment, as we call it, out of 10, is to think and conceive in a circular manner so that we can not only have the least, but almost have no reject at all of anything we're going to use. And of course, there's going to be some rejects, such as certain types of fabrics that can be used, that we will also always first try to upcycle or to reuse as they were. And only down the chain, at the very end, what we've not managed to reuse as they were, or to upcycle or distribute to associations who can upcycle it, then we will consider recycling. But the other thing that's very important about fashion shows that I'd like to share, and I'll give you examples. Fashion show, I mean, there are a lot of fashion shows and there are a lot of temporary ephemeral events in the world of fashion, and not just fashion. But fashion is the most visible one of all of them. So in addition to making sure that we as a production and design company design responsibly, more than that, what we've tried to do is to raise the awareness of our client through the way they work together with us. And of course, help raise the awareness globally through the events we do once we agree on the fact that they have a huge resonance. I mean, I just received numbers this week of the past Fashion Week, which was that confined semi-lockdown Fashion Week of September. And a show like Christian Dior, which was one of the few important shows that we did that remained physical, even though there was only a tenth of the traditional physical audience, had 28 million views. When you do a fashion show, which is of course a communication tool for a fashion or luxury brand, but that you're going to touch tens and tens of millions of people, I think in addition to making sure you do it eco-responsibly and you do it as circularly as you can, you need to help promote the idea of circularity. And that's something we've been doing for years, is try to not only use less, as I just said, or use reusably, but promote that idea. Promote the idea that always new, which is the basis of fashion, is not always right. That something that you've seen before that you're going to see again in a different way or used in a different manner, maybe even cooler because you're reusing it in a different manner. And I think that adding a desirability to the reuse and to the circularity is in a way one of the first elements that fashion showmaking can do. So of course, when we do a fashion show like Jacquemus in the fields of Provence and lavender a year ago, or again we did in the wheat fields in July this year, we together with Simon Jacquemus helped promote the idea that a very internationally resonating fashion show doesn't have to spend tons of carbon and money, doesn't have to exist through a very complicated physical installation. But the key to be able to do that is obviously creative freedom, which you don't always get in my life. You get it with amazing designers like Simon Jacquemus, but it's also strategic freedom. Simon agreed a while ago to come out of the traditional Fashion Week system and to go kind of wherever he wants, whenever he wants. And he's given us the freedom to help him do that and to do it in a way where we could use the creative freedom to counterbalance the fact that there would be less audience. In other words, by going to Provence or to the wheat fields in like we did recently, you will have, at a time which is not Fashion Week, you will have 10 or 20 or 50 times less people fashion professionals present physically than you would have during Fashion Week. On the other hand, you have more time and you don't need the same infrastructure. So we show that we spend less carbon. We show that we have no infrastructure. We showed when we were in the lavender field or in the wheat field that there was just hardly a bench or a chair. There was no light. There was a sound that you can imagine but not physically see. There was hardly no power used. And yet the creativity, the creative freedom that we had to do creatively well, that he gave himself to do creatively so well, made the show be probably more efficient from a social media and communication point of view than many other shows that have less restraints. So in a way, when you allow yourself the creative freedom, you can apply eco-responsibly and circularity much better than when you have less creative freedom, as we do in places like that. I'll give you another example of a bigger scale. There's a lot of ways to apply circularity. A house like Dior, for whom we've designed and produced fashion shows for over 20 years now, which is quite amazing in the world of fashion. Now, as a designer, Maria Grazia Chiori, and the new president, Pietro Beccari, and Oliviera Bossi, and three people that basically run such a large company, when they agree with us to our will to try to do that, not only to do it better and more sustainably, but to help promote the ideas of sustainability and circularity through fashion shows, yet keeping some controversiality, because fashion is also that. If you only do good and you only promote good while doing good and showing good, you're going to lose people's interest. So it's a very tricky, contrasting, weird thing that we're in, where we need to keep some contrast to the good doing. We need some, not necessarily shocking, but controversiality within the good doing to keep the fashion audience interested, yet to touch them with the circularity. We did the last show we did for Dior in Italy in Lecce in July. We used all local talents. We did a pretty big production, yet applying 100% of the 10 sustainability commandments that we published in February. We managed to respect them. We did the show without any audience because it was COVID times when no one traveled or could travel, and reached huge numbers in communication while helping, again, promoting the idea, hopefully, of circularity. So I think those are some examples of that, but going even way further back, I remember, a brand called Rodarte.
Alex, just to jump in, so many examples and insights there. Just wanted to, I know we want to hear from Helen in just a second as well.
Of course, sorry, Helen.
I'd love to at some point come back to the principles or the commandments, because that's something that I think this idea of sharing knowledge or a mindset more broadly throughout an industry is something I know we'd like to pick up on. But Ella, I think you had a question for Helen that we wanted to move on to.
Yes, Helen. So for context, Helen is the director of textile materials and knitwear at WGSN, and WGSN is one of the main forecaster for fashion, beauty, and lifestyle. So Helen, we wanted to ask you, in what you have seen in terms of trends and forecasting, what are you seeing around circular design recently?
Hi, well, thank you very much for inviting me here today. I think at WGSN, as you said, we are a trend forecasting business, but I guess that in a way the word trend has sort of changed over the time. I think the word trend, it can mean sort of constant newness, but we tend to redefine that now as change forecasting. And I think that obviously as a service industry to the fashion and design industry, we sort of go hand in hand, sort of watching what they're doing and sort of helping them to make sort of better decisions. And I think that sustainability and circularity is fundamental to how the industry is going to move forward. So of course, for us, we are definitely within our content and our communications and the kind of the content we put on the platform, we are sort of building in a lot of conversation and actions around sustainability and specifically circularity. I think that fundamentally for us, it's about commenting on good practice and sort of showcasing what brands, innovators, designers, individuals are doing. And sort of in that way, sort of communicating globally what's happening, and sort of that sort of constant information that we can put out around better practice, we think is, it's just one of those influences of many that will help our clients sort of move in the right direction.
And what have you seen, like as a specific examples of circular design that you could tell us about, those specific trends?
So I think that there's lots of things happening at lots of different levels. I mean, obviously, from a point of view of real innovation, sort of technical innovation, we're seeing a lot of things around recycling. So, we've got obviously pioneering brands such as Adidas doing monomaterial sneakers. So that idea of that sort of infinite recycling, which is really important. I think how that plays out to sort of brands is that a lot of brands are sort of targeting themselves and doing some work around making one product circular. And I think that what we're finding when we're talking to some of our retail partners is that they are looking at one product in particular and how to sort of unpick the way that things have been made in the past and sort of apply circular thinking. And then I think the idea is if you can get one garment working, then obviously those learnings are really important. I mean, obviously with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, with the denim, the jean redesign, again, we're seeing the denim industry, which has always been a very innovative industry, but at the same time having a lot of issues around, obviously cotton farming and dyes and all the negative things that goes around the denim industry. But they have been very innovative and pioneering. So I think the project that you have with so many partners in the supply chain around the circular jean is one of one very important project, and we expect to see more of this going forward. I think that what we're looking at WGSN is this idea of getting the industry to, the established industry that is, to look at completely changing their mindset. It's almost like talking about speculative design. So it's kind of like the starting point for a design team should be how can I design for this emerging circular economy, which is very new and is working in certain pockets of innovation, but it's obviously scalability and collaboration is really important. But I think to make that first start and to get your internal teams really focused on that, I think that's where the creativity can really start, because it's really about designing with restraint, because I think with circularity there are a lot of interesting limits. But I think with design, often having restraints or limitations can actually be very creative and can really make people think in a completely different way. And I think that this is this starting point of actually using design as a tool for problem solving, as well as creativity, and how those two things go together, I think is really, really interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. Joe, would you like to maybe ask some questions yourself to our guests?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to come back to, as I said, this notion, Alex, of the commandments, and it really sounds like they've forced you to be creative and to do things differently. So, do you think that's something that's needed in the fashion industry? Is there a sense of young designers and creative people coming through and looking for new sources of inspiration, or is this just another thing that they could pick up and be interested in?
No. I think. Well, first of all, I agree with Ellen. I think it's a need in every industry, and when you are creative, restraints sometimes make you even more creative. I mean, it's very well known. When you look at the beginnings of every major director in Hollywood, most often their best films were done at the beginnings when they didn't have the budgets of the big studios and they were less commercial. And I think that applies everywhere. I mean, obviously, I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. We do shows for very young or small designers with no budget or smaller budgets, and we do shows with very large luxury houses with very large budgets. But in both cases, you can be very, very creative, but you keep doing the small ones because they keep you even more creative. I think that applies everywhere. I think that the circularity is not just one more new thing on the side. Obviously, we all here agree on the fact that more eco-responsibility and circularity is needed for the world to continue to go round, and otherwise we wouldn't be here. And on the contrary, I think it will become normality. I think what we have to do here as people that care is to make normal what today is actually just a new thing. It has to become completely normal. When we applied, to go back to the 10 Commandments, what we've learned with my team over the few last years while going through the process of our certification is all the things that are obvious, but that you didn't think of before, and how to apply them to what we do, which is different than what designers do when they design fashion. But in a way, what we do when we do fashion shows, I'm not going to do false modesty. One of the elements, first of all, the fashion show is one of the most visible fashion communicative tools that fashion has. And it's definitely one of the most probably visible thing in the world in general, if you compare to what's comparable to stage or to music or to theater or to movies. It's another form of pop culture that is very commercial. It has a cycle that's very short, much more than music or movies. So in a way, it's there all the time in your face, and we might as well use it. And we have to use it because fashion participates to the global ecological problems of the world. When we, together with the designers, and we've had the chance, for example, to work with Yves Saint Laurent since Anthony Vaccarello is there, and globally the Caring Group, and they were very supportive of all the efforts we made to implement the commandments. Same with Dior, as I said, that we've done for over 20 years, but lately with Maria Grazia, we've done a lot when we went to Italy this year, when we went to Morocco 2 years ago, to source locally, to do locally, not just sustainably, but also socially, and to help implement the local production and the circularity. But even further than that, with designers like Isabelle Marant or Rodarte, or we've tried to think together on how to even promote the idea of circularity. We're thinking and starting to discuss with them on the idea of reusing clothes from before on the next runway on purpose, used a different way, styled a different way. We're toying with the idea of reusing the patterns of previous seasons, which are already cut but maybe done with a new fabric. We're toying with the idea of bringing back the clothes of those luxury brands so that they add a little something to it that gives the novelty, yet it's the old clothes. But I'm even toying with the idea all the time of just trying to make old new or cool. Personally, since I'm a teenager, I've always dressed myself with vintage, and I've always filled my houses with vintage design because maybe I'm more sensitive to it. But of course, I respect and help promote contemporary creation, and it's very important. I think you can mix the two. And I think a fashion show, a fashion event, or any event that resonates has to now mix the two and say, look, it's cool to reuse something you saw last season. Like we started working with Kenzo and Felipe last season. We designed those plastic bubble tubes that we did the first show in, and we designed them in sections. We built them and we produced and bought them so that they can be reused in smaller sections anywhere.
Sure.
And I think there's something very important and a great responsibility we'll have today of promoting that idea of longer lasting, better crafted, better quality, reusing, but also creative. Like keep creating using stuff that you've had used before.
I'm interested to get Helen's perspective on this as well, because and maybe I think we hear these really sort of almost like beacons of innovation and experimentation from Alex. Helen, do we need a bit of a reality check? Is this really going to change the fashion industry overall?
Yeah, I think it will. I think that we have really got those pockets of innovation already. So we've got leading lights in sort of circular thinking who are sort of maybe more established. For example, the North Face and Patagonia from the active side. You've got, the denim industry is, we've got a lot of with yourselves, a lot of partners that are sort of in the jeans redesign. We've got a lot of young designers who are just, quite disruptive in the way that they're thinking. I mean, they are using vintage. They're getting access to dead stock materials or designer fabrics. They are, doing really, very exciting upcycling and recycling projects. And then, of course, you've got the brands. And again, H&Ms of this world, they are, doing a lot in that area. You've got obviously the recent ASOS launch. And I think that it's something that it's one of those things where it's like we should, and a lot of the retail brands and people that we talk to are talking about they should, but if not now, when? I think it's coming, and they are. I think companies inside the companies themselves, they are designing for this. They're looking at it. They know it's something that they've got to do. So I think the main sort of blocker at the moment really is about scaling up and collaboration and sort of getting the whole sort of supply chain geared up to do this. So obviously you need your manufacturers, you need your fabric suppliers, you need your brands, you need the young creatives that who are learning. And I think it's great. You've got a lot of things going on around education. A lot of brands are teaming up with universities. There's a lot of kind of stuff in the syllabus around circular thinking, sustainable design. So I think, and the younger generation are very active about this topic. And I think we're seeing a whole new generation of designers from university or within companies who've come in and are challenging how companies are working and want to move the industry forward. They're very, very conscious about sustainability. So I am a bit of an optimist, and I do think that companies have a responsibility to keep talking about it, keep advocating it, and that's what we do at WSN. We flag up who's doing it well. In a way, it's like shaming some of the brands, companies that we have who don't do it, because they're seeing all of this activity happening. So in a way, we're trying to just align with what's happening and just kind of keep showcasing actually that it's happening, and people are getting more and more activated by it. So although, as I said, there are elements of the industry that are already on that journey, I think it is a big change, because it's about changing your systems, changing the way that you think, the way that you work, the way you produce, the way that you sell, the post sale, the consumer. There's so many elements to it, but I do think that everyone has to start somewhere. And I think, hopefully that this kind of this vision will start to sort of go into reality.
In this sense, Helen, if you would have one tip for a young creative who would like to start applying circular design in his or her work, what would you say?
So I think that I think the design process really is such a key part of circularity. It's design thinking. I think that anyone that's coming through the system who's at university or wants to set something up, or a fledgling company, I think it's about having a real purpose. A lot of the things that we talk about at WSN is avoiding designing for landfill. So I think it's having a really clear focus and purpose and vision. Really looking at your impact. If you're going to be adding more products into the world, what kind of message do you want to give out? What does your brand stand for? How do you minimize your impact? And it's everything. It's from the fibers and the materials you select to the design itself, looking at zero waste kind of design, and then it's looking at all sorts of things about how you're going to sell or market that product as well, who you're going to connect in with, who is your customer, what kind of communities can you build. There's kind of a lot of things around this, but I think it's just putting circularity and sustainability at the heart of what you do, because I think that's I think that the way that the world is changing right now, people are looking more inward. They are really thinking about what they're going to buy and what their values are. So I think that design needs to have an element of reflection in that, and needs to be something that is purposeful. I think that's really important.
Thank you, Helen. Joe, I can see that we have received a question from the audience. Would you like to maybe ask it to our speakers?
Sure. I mean, we've had loads of questions in, really good ones. And I wonder if we could just get kind of really snappy answers, because I know we're approaching the end of the session, really, running over a little bit. But what is the end goal with circular design? And just really briefly, could each of you have a go at just trying to define it, give us the dictionary definition of circular design for fashion?
I think you've done a great definition at the beginning of the session. I'll add to what Hélène just said, and I completely agree. I think that the best advice, and that goes with the definition of circular design today or tomorrow, would be to make sure that if you will add a product to the world, that you do it as circularly as you can. However, the means doesn't need to influence the look. I think that nowadays it's a tool. Everything should be done with more circularity and more circular design in mind. Nevertheless, it doesn't have to look it. I think that whether you're a fashion designer or a designer of anything in general, of course you need to follow your instinct and make sure if you create something new. Otherwise, there's no point in putting it out there. And once you create something new, everything from now on should be created with the most zero waste possible way and the most circular way. But it doesn't have to look like the old stereotype of something that was eco-responsible. It needs to look great and be done the most responsibly possible. And from now on, I hope and believe that yes, there will be a moment when it will be normal. I think the new circular has to be the new normal, period.
What do you think, Helen?
I completely agree. I think we're at this really interesting tipping point at the moment where there's so much going on around sustainability, circularity, and there's a lot of noise and a lot of interest about it, and a lot of things on the market that are trying to differentiate with that. But I think that obviously it's not the consumer's responsibility to worry about circularity in a way. It should just be what garments are in the future. And I think we'll get beyond that sort of differentiation between what is more sustainable than something else. Hopefully, it will just be a systems change, and we will just swap the old style of making for a new style. But as Alex said, I think creativity is really important. It's a structure or guideline it's a framework to design into, but it shouldn't affect excitement, newness, and good design. So I think it's being able to use a framework of thinking and then to use your creativity to create something that people want to wear, they want to keep, something that will spark joy, something that can be then maybe given to someone else or resold. So I think it's creating products that people want to wear, they're desirable, but they also keep their value. And then hopefully could be recycled at the ultimate point of their life cycle. Yeah.
Thanks, Helen. I'm going to hand back to Elo to close us out, but I love both of your answers. I would just add from my perspective, the notion of an end goal is almost something we need to move away from. This should be a constant journey. The perfect circular design may never be done, but I hope that that's a constant creative challenge and prospect for the folks in the design and the creative industries, in the fashion industry and beyond. I hope that's exciting.
Very.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely.
Well, that is all what we have time for today, but really wanted to thank Alex and Helen for being here with us today. It was just brilliant listening to you, your stories and your experience. And I also wanted to thank you for watching us today. We haven't had time to go through all your questions, but we will get back to it and answer you on the social media. If you haven't had the chance to watch the previous 4 episodes of the fashion show, you can rewatch it on our online event website or on our YouTube channel. Thanks so much for having watching us today, and hopefully see you soon.